ask a question than the politicians? 2 minutes, ask a question, 3 minutes for an answer. Let's try to keep it on time here. We got a little stoplight here. If it's red, it means could you please wind it up? You know, ask your questions without getting into an awful lot of lengthy detail, even though we wanted to. And then whoever asks the question, could you please state your name and which town you're from? And if we get on to one topic, let's kind of stay with that topic, and then we can work on that for a little while and then move to the next topic, okay? I guess I'm going to ask our legislators to introduce themselves, please.
Good morning, everyone. Is this volume okay for this small room?
Loud.
Okay. It's also buzzy.
Yeah.
Well, good morning. I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I was the first one here for the first time ever, which is weird. I'm usually running in at the last minute. I live in East Middlebury, and I represent all of Addison County, Huntington, Hillsborough, and Rochester. I serve on 2 committees, the Natural Resources, spilled coffee, committee.
We're good. It's not moving.
Okay. Good thing for the tablecloth. The Natural Resources Committee and the Finance Committee. Natural Resources, right now we're looking at stormwater, the 3-acre rule. So if anybody in this room is impacted by that, if you are, you probably know it or hopefully know it, let me know and I can talk to you about what we're doing. It's about stormwater and water quality for lakes, ponds, and streams. And then I serve on the Finance Committee in the afternoon. We are trying to get through a bunch of sort of minor bills that are mostly cleanup bills in order to receive the House's proposal for the new education finance system, which should be coming our way next week. Representative Conlon will have more to say about that. So there's not much going on in either of my committees at the moment, but happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Peter Conlon from Cornwall. I am a House Rep for Cornwall, Goshen, Leicester, Ripon, and Salisbury. I'm the chair of the House Education Committee. And we are about to unveil, put on the floor of the House, a major education transformation proposal that talks about both the finances, which is actually being dealt with in a different committee, as well as the governance. Many of you have probably seen or heard about the governor's education transformation proposal. This is not that, but it really has some shared goals about really sort of building scale, large building as in we need to build scale in our education system, larger districts so we have less redundancy in these central offices. If you think of Addison County having 3 school districts, all with the same sort of central office people, probably unnecessary. As well as trying to sort of build more statewide cohesion in how education is delivered in Vermont. Everything from having a kind of a uniform statewide calendar for students to having statewide graduation standards for all Vermont students. So a graduate from one high school, has sort of the same skills and abilities as a graduate from another high school. So anyway, we are working on that. We are putting it on the floor this week. It's going to be a very interesting process. The thing about education is that it crosses political boundaries. It's really much more about where you're from and what the system is in your area than it is about being a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a progressive. So sort of figuring out if the bill's going to pass or not becomes very challenging. But it's been a big process. It's a big proposal. Thank you.
I don't know if this is working very good. Maybe you just want to talk from where you are.
Yeah, I'm loud enough. Good morning, Steve Heffernan, your Addison County other senator. I'm on Ag and Education. Ag, the 2 most important bills I think we've gotten through is one, the Right Farm Act, so farmers no longer have to prove they're not guilty. It's on the burden of the person making the accusation that approve that they are guilty. And then the second, Ruth you sponsored that, right? Is what's the name of it, Ruth?
Farm Safety Act.
Farm Safety Act, and that is for farmers that during inclement weather receive damages that either insurance won't cover or they don't have money enough to cover themselves. It's up to, I think it's going to come onto the Senate floor with $7.5 million funding, and each farmer that applies can get up to $150,000 at the max. During the last frost and flood event, that's escaping me too, what helped with the business?
The BGAP program?
BGAP program. So the BGAP program, 34 farmers were eligible, got the grants out of 343 that applied. So it's a very important bill that will help farmers that get affected by a climate event. Education, Peter kind of hit it on the head that each committee is working on their version. I hope that we get a little bit more joint committee work so that when we come out with a bill that they're so similar and that they're easier to work rather than having two drastically different bills. That would be good to be seen. On a not so great note in my mind, Senator Seth Bungar had put out a map of 9 districts, and we were asked to put that on hold till 2027. I don't know if we will or will not, but I think that's kicking that can a little bit too far down for education. I'm not sure on Peter's committee what's happening there yet. We haven't seen much of that, but we'll work with it. I am definitely, like you said, as far as what political group you gather, in my mind it's about always first the children, how it's going to affect them, and then affordability. And if we don't watch out how it is for affordability, it's only going to get worse. I know we also talked that they want to do the foundation funding formula. I don't know what that's looking like, but under our current education system, that's going to be a disaster. So hopefully we figure that out. Happy to ask questions. I do have to leave at 8:30 today, so
Thank you.
just let you know. Thanks.
All right, who'd like to hop up? I don't know if our speakers are working very good, but it's a small room. I believe we can talk without using our speakers to get all the static. So who would like to get up and ask the first question? Yes, over there.
Yes, my name is Ben Gleason. I live in Middlebury. I used to have a farm out in Britain and now retired. I would like to address Peter Conlon about the school issue. I wonder if you have read Doug Racine's letter that was published in the Addison Independent. Due to my wife, she read that in the Vermont Digger and thought it should be important to have it in the local paper, which they did. So I support small schools. I think the small schools give the children the best education. I support having civics in schools. Everyone should learn how our government works. And I'm opposed to closing all these small schools. And if you were to read Doug Racine's letter, he spells it out just how many things schools are required to do these days. A lot of mental health, for instance, that shouldn't be in schools. And that's one of the things that makes schools so much more expensive. They're required to do so many different things besides just teach children. And I believe that that we should look at that and
How it's funded, you mean? How the mental health.
yeah, how it's funded. It should be funded in the general fund. That's what Doug Racine claims. and that would take a lot of the responsibilities away from the schools, and we'd be able to keep our small schools to give probably the best education. I know from,
So, what's your question, please?
so have you read the letter, and do you agree with that? Or is it just shut down small schools and have just big schools that do not address the issues of the some of the students that kind of get left behind?
I have not read the letter fully. I've certainly heard about it. And as I recollect, the opinions that are shared by a lot of people, that we pay the cost of education. Part of the reason it's gone up is because we do have to do so much for students, and student need has increased so much, far beyond sort of the usual reading, writing, and arithmetic that we talk about. And schools are required to take all comers and provide whatever support services students need to get them through the learning day so they have access to their education. And so it has become costly, and the needs have grown. And we could fund it in a different way. I think I would certainly be more than happy to pull things out of the education fund that are not sort of direct classroom learning costs. Where the challenge comes is, where do you then shift those costs? You can shift them to the general fund, but that is also you're just moving tax costs from one area to another, and you would need to find either an offsetting expense in the general fund, or you would need to raise general fund taxes, which in our current political environment, we have a no new taxes, no new fees governor, and we don't have a supermajority in the legislature that could override a veto that had increased taxes in it. So there's a certain political reality out there. As to the challenge with smaller schools and larger schools, we are really at the point of kind of reckoning with the fact that 40 years ago we had 123,000 students in our state. And we now have about 84,000. So you're really looking at a drop of about 40,000 students over those 4 decades. And we simply don't have the scale in many areas that it provides students with the opportunities they need. We have high schools and middle schools that have class sizes, like the full grade of less than 20. High schools that are graduating fewer than 25 kids. And when you have that sort of small scale, you can look at the comparisons of what a high school like Middlebury Union High School can offer versus what a high school like Cabot can offer, or even just Virgins, which is significantly smaller. And the opportunity gap is significant, and that is both because of scale and because of costs and decisions made in that community. So as we move to a different funding formula, one of the reasons that it's a popular idea is that it sort of helps close that equity gap. But our lack of scale in so many areas is depriving kids, and I would say especially at the sort of middle and high school level, a lot of opportunity. So there's a real chance here to both kind of bend the cost curve with scale, but also to have an offsetting benefit of opportunity. I see the red light is on.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like what Peter had to say. Also, when we look at small schools, you have to, let's take Ripon and Lincoln. Lincoln has showed it can be viable. They're teaching their students, I think, somewhere around 13,000 some odd dollars per student. A small school like that is manageable and probably won't be affected. Now let's take Ripon. Anybody here from Ripon? 26 kids in I think, total up in that school right now. It just is not a viable option to keep that school open.
That's the number for next year, that's not current.
But what is it right now, do you know?
I don't remember.
Okay, but so we need to look at that, and I don't think it's going to be automatically closed, but the schools have to be viable, and I think everybody understands that. I don't like that we use fear of hey, we're closing all small schools, because that's just not the case. If they're viable, you know, I don't see how the state would say, hey, you're a viable school, you're doing it for what we're putting out for the dollar figure, and we're gonna close you anyway. Rutland, they have 2 high schools down there that graduated 13 and 15 students within, I think, 7 miles of each other. It would be wise to combine them schools. The reason that usually doesn't happen is because of the legality and how people feel. And of course, your school does become who you are. But if we can't afford it, it's like at your household. If you can't afford it, you have to do something new. And I hope, as a state, we take the time to do it right. That's what we feel in our committee we're going to be doing in the Senate committee, is trying to get it right. By the way, Rob North's here. He didn't get to introduce.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Well, he's the second. You might want to.
Okay, does anybody else from the legislature want to answer his question? Or?
But he didn't show up. He wasn't here when we
Yeah.
spoke.
Okay. We got Rob North here. I'll give him a chance in
Okay.
just a minute.
I think Peter and Steve covered a lot of it. One thing I'll say about the mental health services, just to add to that, is a lot of the mental health services in schools, and I will say that ACSD, the local school district, actually does this quite well, partnering with the counseling service of Addison County to hire school-based clinicians and provide mental health services in our schools. And when they do that, that actually lowers the cost. It's cheaper to do that than to do it through hiring your own school-based clinician fully on the school budget. When you do it through the counseling services at Addison County, a large portion of the person's salary is actually covered by Medicaid funds, which are federal funds. And that ends up bringing the cost down.
Yeah, good luck.
I know, so that was what I was just gonna say, is that now we're gonna see a problem because the federal Medicaid funding is going to decrease. So there is just a huge issue. Peter's absolutely right. Moving things to the general fund requires us to raise taxes on the general fund or cut something else out of the general fund. Moving something to federal funding is obviously problematic right now. So a lot of it is a balancing act. And while I know that some people think that mental health services are not education, I can tell you that if kids don't have appropriate mental health services, they won't be able to learn. And kids are in schools, so being able to provide those mental health services to kids in schools is really, really important, because that's where they are. And so I understand what Doug Racine is saying, and I don't disagree with him, but it's not as simple as just saying, like, move it out of the education fund over to the general fund and it will be solved.
All right. Before we start the next question, Mr. North, would you like to get up and speak for a minute? Introduce yourself.
Sure, I'll just introduce myself quickly. I'm Rob North. I live in Ferrisburg. I serve the greater Virgins area as a representative in the House of Representatives. So that would be Virgins, Ferrisburg, Panton, Addison, Waltham, and half of New Haven. So I recognize I'm out of my district being here with you all this morning, but wanted to join you and just let you know that I'm available if you do have questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Right over here.
Abby Sessions from Wadebridge. This is for Peter. I wonder if you can explain how the new funding formula differs from the old funding formula.
I'll do my best. I'm on the Education Committee, not on the Ways and Means Committee, so it's a little challenging. So currently, today, school districts set budgets. They put those budgets to the voters. The voters approve them, hopefully, eventually. All of those budgets get tallied up together, and they send the bill to the legislature to be paid. In the legislature, we then set tax rates, property tax rates, in order to raise enough money to fund all of those school budgets that have been approved by voters locally. The education fund is made up of all the property taxes that we talk about, plus the sales tax, all of it, part of the rooms and meals tax, and part of the purchase and use tax. So the levers that we have to pull in order to pay the bill i.e. all the school budgets that are approved, is really property taxes. So if the bill comes in and it's a high bill and we don't have enough of the other taxes to offset, then we have to raise property taxes. The new funding formula that it will be proposed will essentially set a base amount for each student in Vermont. And each student in Vermont would then be sort of looked at almost individually and provided an added weight depending on are they an English language learner student? Because we certainly know that they need extra services. Are they a special education student? We know that they need extra services. Are they a student from poverty, which has been directly tied with needing additional services? And then essentially, rather than sort of districts coming up with a budget, trying to guess what the voters will want, districts will be given a set amount based on what is called a foundation formula. And this is a much more sophisticated foundation formula than the foundation formula of old, and is really sort of focused on making sure that schools have an adequate amount in order to educate their kids. It's an average adequate amount. So in some areas which are really underspending on their students, they're going to see a significant bump in the money that they receive without having sort of to go to the voters for it. In other areas where it's a high spending district on a per pupil basis, they're probably going to have to learn to live with less. But it's a much more equitable system, and it's also a system that allows school boards and superintendents to say, okay, we know what we're going to get, we know what we have, it's predictable, it's stable. Now, how can we best manage to that amount and provide the best education for our students? So that, in a nutshell, is what it is.
And will districts be allowed to raise funds on top of the funding formula so that we end up with gold towns and poor towns like we used to have under the old funding formula?
Well, the sort of the bill that is yet to be. So I just want to say that the bill hasn't even been on the House floor yet. That's going to happen this week, and then it has to go through the whole Senate process. So the final product may not look like the product as it exists today. I think, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure under the current proposal that districts, and these would be much larger districts, so you'd have a lot more sort of equity of grand list across the district, will be allowed to have supplemental spending per voter approval on a very limited basis. In other words, that might be limited to 10%. I know there was talk, and I'm not sure where this falls in, but that maybe the allowable amount would be based on grand list per student to sort of avoid that kind of gold town or gold district in this case imbalance that existed that led to Act 60. So I think that will be part of it. I think it'll be very limited. I think if there are great disparities in property wealth, then part of there will be kind of a sharing pool with districts that are unable to do that. But it depends on what the districts looks like and what the balance of grand list is there. One of the sort of selling points of the governor's 5 districts, would be a big change, though, is that there's the grand lists among those districts were pretty equitable, so everybody would have the same sort of ability to raise above the foundation formula.
Thank you. Any more questions? Did you have a question?
No, it sort of got addressed.
Okay then, thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't miss you. Okay, over here, thank you.
Lori Cox from Ripton, and I do want to say that I'm not here to talk about our school situation, except that it's truly a housing issue at this point. People who are in the demographic to have young children can't afford to buy a house, and most of the rentals in Ripton are, like maybe a garage apartment or something that would be fine for one person or a couple, but they aren't really available places to have a young family. What I wanted to ask about, and it is an education issue, is I know that the proposal that had come out talked about classroom sizes. If I am correct, I believe it was minimum of 15 or an average of 15 for K to 3, and 4 through high school, average of 25. I know because I was working in Brandon at the time that the Neshabie School was built back in the 1980s, that those classrooms were designed to hold 25 students max. And I know at the time that the Ripton Elementary School was built, because I was living there at the time, that those classrooms were built for 25 students max. And that was before we moved to educational practices that allowed students a little more movement, you might say. So I really question how many schools in the state have classrooms that would be appropriate for more than 25 students. So once you have 25 as your average, that's going to be an issue. I also know that in the time, because I worked in Brandon at the elementary school for basically my whole career, that if a classroom was going to have more than 20 students, then there was a second adult, like a paraeducator, placed in that classroom to provide adequate educational support for such numbers. Now that might not happen if it was 21, but if it got above that. So I am asking where those numbers are at this point in people's planning, because it's all very good to make up numbers and put them in place. When I was in elementary school, our classrooms were all around 30 or so, but when I was in elementary school, nobody who had anything, I mean, if they even had difficulty walking, they were sent to a different, this was in Seattle, so it was a city, they were sent to a different facility. Any kind of issue at all. So
just one quick, simple answer. The number 25 does not appear in the proposal anywhere. The governor's proposal that he put out called for student-teacher ratios of 25 to 1. The bill that is coming out of the House has class size averages of 12 for kindergarten, 15, I think, up through 6th grade, and then middle school and high school 18. So 25 doesn't exist, and partly because that's what the research shows, is that these are class sizes that both are scaled down enough so that students get individual attention, but are large enough that students have the ability to interact with one another. I've been really around the state as being part of the Commission on the Future of Public Education. I've really interacted with a lot of teachers who have said, yeah, it is in fact much easier to teach a class of 15 than it is to teach a class of 7, because the students help each other a lot, and they are much more sort of engaged in their learning rather than the teacher sort of having to be the entertainer all day long. So 25 does not exist in the proposal that is coming out of the House. It is 12, 15, and 18. And I think the other thing I would say is it is not only a housing issue. Lori's absolutely right that we simply don't have the housing to bring in young people, but we also have a birth rate change. I mean, the demographics, the reason why we have gone from 123,000 40 years ago to 80,000 today in our classrooms is because we simply don't have the birth rate that we used to have. Every year my 30-year-old son comes home, goes to a big party up in Goshen on New Year's Eve, lots and lots of his high school friends and their partners are there, and there's probably 30 to 50 young people there, and every year I ask, how many marriages, how many kids? And I don't think the number on either side has gone above 2. So that's sort of the demographic issue we're looking at.
Thank you. I'll take your question just a minute. I'd like everybody to please be aware of the red light thing. I'd like to give you enough time to ask your questions, but please ask your questions so that everybody can have a chance to speak. Go ahead, thank you.
Well, just as a follow-up on that classroom size, I'm wondering if there's gonna be this limit of only 2 classes. Susan Davis from Weybridge.
Okay.
And we had 2 sons go through the Weybridge Elementary School, and at one point, they were in classrooms of 3 different grades. And it worked, from my perspective, really well. And there was a lot of that, older kids helping younger kids and that sort of thing, which I understand from reading people like Maslow, that's a very high, well, how do I want to say it? There's a lot of value. When you can teach somebody else what you think you understand, you get a lot more out of it than just saying, okay, I know that, I can go off on my own. So I'm just wondering, are there any limits on how many classrooms you can blend?
Yes, based on the testimony we received from educators and backed up by research, it is limited to 2 grades. And you know, we've seen the 3-grade problem, frankly, unfold in Ripton, where parents were very concerned that a certain age group within that 3-grade band was not getting the teacher attention and time, because it's very hard on a teacher to teach such broad grade levels. And if you have a very small population of students, you know, what 3 grades might be lumped together year after year can be very disruptive, because it probably has to change as sort of different school age populations go through. But yes, the proposal that is coming out of in the House limits it to 2 grades in a multi-grade classroom.
Thank you. Go up back there, please.
I'm Linda Andrews from Bristol, Vermont, and I just want to propose another way of reducing property taxes, and if it's even feasible. But wonder if you took, just because the health benefits or the health plans of all the teachers make up about, what, 16% of the budget, why not just take all that and have that paid for by income tax, so that you don't have to worry about that, but we could pay it through an income tax? So I just want to propose that if it's a possibility.
Finance committee will take that question. These aren't working anymore, so we don't need to stand by the well, it's hard with the pole here. I don't know where to stand, but thanks for that question, Linda. There are 2 answers to that. First of all, one of the driving cost factors for education budgets is healthcare costs, and you know, every school has seen a huge increase. Every business, every family, every government, everything, everybody's seen this huge increase. And you may have heard in the news lots going on with negotiations between the Green Mountain Care Board and our largest hospital, UVM, which is one of the most expensive hospitals in the country. So we are making progress in trying to rein in some of the healthcare costs. There have been bills in both the House and the Senate that are now swapped over that have provisions including reference-based pricing and change in the certificate of need process, and a lot of things that are happening to hopefully start to rein in the cost of healthcare. It will be very, very difficult to do that in this federal environment when the federal government is about to slash Medicaid and potentially Medicare. Both programs we rely on heavily in Vermont. So that could have an upward pressure on healthcare costs, which might negate any downward pressure that we can bring in. But to the question about whether we could just move the healthcare costs off of school budgets and pay for them with an income tax, it's kind of the same answer to the question that Ben asked about, you know, can we move the mental health costs out and pay for them through the general fund, because the general fund is largely an income tax fund. If we do that, we have to cut something somewhere else or raise taxes. And as Peter said, we're in an environment where the governor will not okay a tax increase, and so we would have to cut something else, which will be very difficult in this environment where we're going to be filling holes for cuts in federal funding. So we have taken testimony in the Finance Committee about looking at, and I think we are going to take more testimony this week at an income-based proposal for paying for schools, but I think the prospects for it are slim, just to be blunt. But we are taking a look at everything to try to manage how can we pay for the full cost.
For those who,
Let the senators.
for those who support shifting cost to the general fund, I will just point out that this year it is proposed to basically buy down property tax rates with $77 million of general fund surplus. So you can think of that as shifting costs to the general fund because we're using that general fund dollar to bring down property tax rates.
Thank you. I'm gonna let her speak and then you next, thank you. Go ahead.
Lois Farnham, Middlebury. I want to know where, and it's probably going to the general fund, but last year Vermont started betting on sports. That's raised a lot of money. Where is it going? And why is it not education?
I think that goes to the general fund. It's not as much, do you remember the number? It's
About 5 million.
yeah, $5 to $6 million, so.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, but our education system is almost $2 billion, so it's really not a lot of money when you look at the total amount. So yeah, that goes to the general fund.
I have one more question over here.
So we seem to be adamant at the state level about not raising taxes to pay for healthcare or education or lots of other things, mental health. But we do seem to be willing to raise taxes to fix our roads. And I find it not good that the legislature is willing to raise taxes on fuel-efficient vehicles and electric vehicles in an environment where the governor says we're not going to raise taxes to do anything else. And so my question is, are the legislators here willing to raise taxes on fuel-efficient vehicles?
I'm happy to answer that. We have an electric car, have had one since before COVID. And the answer is, our road system maintenance is largely funded by the gas tax. And so I have to ask myself as an EV driver, am I paying my fair share toward the road maintenance? And I think, I guess I'm willing to say, I'm probably in an electric car where I pay no gas tax. I think I'm willing to say I probably need to pay my fair share.
I'm just going to add to that to give you a little bit more context. So the transportation fund is the fund that pays for most of the road repair and bridges and sort of transportation infrastructure in our state. It is largely funded through the gas tax, as Peter and Dave both mentioned, but it also is matched at the federal level. And if we don't have a certain amount of funding from the state level, we lose federal dollars in our match. And as we've seen the gas tax revenues decline, we are to the point where we don't raise enough revenue to meet the full federal match. So we are literally leaving federal funding on the table. So we are trying to figure out how do we raise sufficient revenue in order to get those federal dollars and be able to have more money in our transportation fund. And the reason that the gas tax is going down is not actually because more people are driving electric vehicles. That's a little part of it, but the major part of it is that gas vehicles have become more fuel efficient. So even people driving those big trucks are paying less for their gas because their big trucks are more fuel efficient than they were. So that those two pressures are making our gas tax revenues go down. Last year, we implemented a registration fee for electric and hybrid vehicles, so that I think it's $70 or something when you register a new EV. 100, okay, I don't remember exactly the number, none of us are on the transportation committee. And then, that is split between, part of it goes to the transportation fund and part of it goes to EV infrastructure. Making sure that we have EV chargers around the state, which is super important right now because the federal funding for EV chargers was just completely obliterated. So that is the only funding that Vermont has right now to make for charge stations. The proposal that I believe is in the transportation committee right now, and if any of you know differently, I believe what it is it would create a per mileage tax for miles driven by EVs that would be calculated. I see the red light, but let me just finish explaining this little thing. Would be calculated every year when you get your car inspected. They would check your mileage and see how much you've driven, and you would pay a tax per mile, similar to the gas tax. That will not start until EVs are 15% of all vehicles registered in Vermont. Right now, EVs are only 12%, and the market rate that is determined by the industry to be stable is 15%. So it wouldn't kick in until there were enough EVs to make them 15%. So you can see there's still a very small percentage of vehicles in the state. So that's, I believe, the proposal on the table, but it hasn't yet fully passed.
And I'd just like to point out, Dave, that as we can see that this is the type of issue that's going to come up as we switch closer to EVs, that the taxes that we get to build and maintain our roads from fuel tax has to come from somewhere. So as we make this transition, it's going to rely more on EV.
How about big trucks and ag vehicles paying their fair share?
The big trucks definitely pay. Every time I register my truck, it's over $1,200 a year. Every time I buy a tire, I pay 12% tax plus the 6% sales tax on tire. Every time, so big trucks do pay their fair share. We pay oversized roads. So you can shake your head no, but being a truck owner, and we're subject to more DOT watching over us, so big trucks pay their fair share. That's what brings the clothes and stuff on our back, our parts, our food. And if you want us to pay more fair share, fine. Guess what? Product prices go up. It's all hand in hand. But as we switch over, we have to pay attention to how are we going to pay to maintain our roads. I've driven quite a bit around Addison County and up north, and our roads are, it's getting scary because I think we want to do 350 miles for the state, and then now it's cut down to like 150 that they're going to do. So it's going to make a difference over the years.
Okay, she had her hand up for a little while. We'll let her go, and please keep attention to your stop by.
I'm gonna disagree with Peter a little bit and agree with you. We drive an EV. I have felt a little guilty in the past not paying towards maintenance of infrastructure. And I understand now that we're putting it on our registration form. I think it's going to be much fairer if it goes to the miles driven. We average about 3,000 miles a year. You average about 3,000 miles a week, a month. For us to pay the same as you is not equitable. But we need to have some kind. But we also need a lot more EV chargers in the state. Right now, many of the ones that are out there are owned by different corporations. Each corporation has their own way of asking you to pay. And you get there and they want you to go to their website, and I'm standing there looking at it. They need to all start to think, oh, MasterCard, Visa card, something that most people have. So, equitable, but it's not yet.
All I said was I was willing to pay my fair share. Yes.
We have a question right up front, and then I'll get to you. Go ahead.
Barb Wilson from Shoreham. And this, Peter, you mentioned the surplus, that they are considering, really paying down, the ed fund, for this coming year. Being that 49% of our tourist dollars come from Canada, and those have cut way, way back, I'm really afraid that our sales tax portion is going to be really small this year, and it's gonna then impact our education fund, because that's a portion of what does go to the education fund. So I really encourage folks not to vote for that, and to keep that money so that it'll help make up surplus for the inevitable reduction of revenue that we're going to get, because it may help this year, but if you look at your tax, if you looked at the annual report from ACSD, our tax rates went down considerably, and they'll go back up again, because it creates a cliff, because it's not like the spending went away, and so we'll have to raise money again. And so I just really don't think it's a good investment for us to do, and it just makes it harder for school boards next year, assuming that we still are bringing it in front of the voters.
Thanks, Barb. I know you pointed at Peter, but I'm
Yes,
to answer that question.
Yes, thank you.
The yield bill, which is the
Yes.
bill that sets the tax rates for this for the state, is actually in the Finance Committee now over in the Senate. It passed in the House, and it's now over in the Senate. And I have heard rumblings, and I hope that they get a little bit louder, that have your sentiments. We are looking at a potential massive drop in revenue for the state, given the situation at the federal level and given the tariff situation. We are heavily reliant on our partnership and our relationship with Canada, and we are going to be hurting big time because of the punishment from the federal government to our neighbors to the north. Also, the reduction in federal funding across the board in so many of our programs, particularly in healthcare, is going to put huge pressure on our budget. So can we afford to put, I think it's not 70 million. I think the version that came to us from the House was $124 million was going to be put to buying down property tax rates in a year when we will not have that much money. So I think that there are some of us who are trying to rethink that. How much can we put toward it? And do we need that money for other purposes? And I agree, having been a school board member, when you buy something down, the next year you have to pay for it. So it creates a false sense of tax reduction that you're just gonna pay for next year. So I think we really do need to be very thoughtful about what we're doing with that money, and whether now is the time to basically spend all that money and then leave us high and dry for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question up back, and then I'll get to you.
Hi, Heidi Willis from Salisbury, and kind of just a quick comment. When we're talking about the school structure and change, you hear a lot about student opportunities and affordability, but I also hope that we will keep in mind that schools are the heart of our communities and are what have helped to create the strong sense of community that exists in Vermont. Having said that, this is a rock and a hard place. But I just hope that when we're making these changes, we keep in mind that those schools are foundational to who we are as a community and can somehow make the changes that support community also. And kind of getting into what Barb was talking about, I just heard over the weekend, and I don't know whether anybody can confirm this or not, that schools were, Zoe Saunders sent out a letter to the schools late last week requiring that they document compliance with the Trump administration's DEI policies, and they need to document that by this Thursday. So the question is how, we're in a different landscape now. We need to start pushing back in many different ways. The relationships with Canada that are damaging us culturally and economically, the impacts, the extortion that will be applied in this case. So how do we push back? How do we push back at the state level and at the local level?
So the Trump administration said they would start cutting Title I funds, which are dollars that go to our poorest school districts and to serve our poorest students. If schools did not sort of comply with their DEI mandate that you sort of scrub all reference and evidence that you have DEI going on. And the letter from the secretary basically outlined that that's what the Trump administration was requiring. Since then, there are been meetings going on all week. There's a meeting going on this morning with the secretary and educators. The Attorney General is clearly going to be getting involved to really kind of come up with a state position. It's a little bit of a non-legislative issue, but it is a sort of issue for all of us to ponder. New York has already said we don't believe that this mandate is legal and have said we will not comply with it. That's probably, I would expect a lot of Vermonters pushing for that as well, and it probably is not legal.
Thank you. All right, another question, please?
Yeah, so Ellen Cronin, Middlebury. The Commissioner of Housing and Community Development sent out a note last week, and they're talking about the draft House budget and that it had reduced funding based on the government's proposal. So it talks about cuts to the infrastructure funding, cuts to the VHFA middle income programs, and then also cuts to the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. And so it's a little bit in the weeds, but this was new news to me, and I'm not sure if anybody can comment on it. It came out on April 4th from Alex Farrell. I mean, one of them is for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. I think they had asked for dedicated $4 million, and the budget, the draft budget from the House, I think had stated that it would do 1-year funding, but not ongoing. So I don't know if anybody can just explain some of the details.
I mean, I'll just speak on behalf of the House, which does the budget first and then moves the budget over to the Senate. It was filled with hard choices, and especially as we sort of prepare for cuts in federal funding. So I think probably with VHIP, you're seeing a fear of loading base funding, which means year after year after year you're obligated to it, to using one-time funding in order to sort of hedge our bets against what the future may hold. And I think that you'll see hard decisions like that throughout the budgets. The governor comes in with a proposal. The House then sort of looks at what the House's priorities are, adjusts accordingly, goes to the Senate, and then they begin the process as well.
And I will just add that this year, like during the COVID year, during 2020, things are changing so rapidly with the federal situation that when the governor put together his budget, his team started in September. He proposed it in January, the House passes it in March, and then the Senate passes it in May, and we all have to pass it together in May. So there's a 9-month period, which often is fairly stable in normal years, and we have tweaks along the way, but this year, just like in 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit in March, things are changing so rapidly that we are having to adjust and make changes along the way. And I also think the House put some of the housing money into different pots. So they were maybe not the pots that the governor asked for, but maybe in different pots. But again, I haven't actually seen all of the proposals, but I did get that email as well, so I'm not sure all the details.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Question up back there?
Yeah, Susan Davis from Weaver. I'm curious about ranked choice voting. Currently, we're being led by a regime that does not represent over 50% or even 50% of the people that voted. And my understanding of ranked choice voting is that it's a system where it ends up requiring that at least 50% of the people that vote are in agreement as to who wins. And is that a legislative issue, or how do you get after that?
I'll answer that because I used to chair the Government Operations Committee, and we did a bill last session about ranked choice voting. So ranked choice voting is where voters pick their first choice, their second choice, their third choice, and sometimes more, and whoever wins has to have at least 50% of the first choices. And so it's a voting system that a lot of people think that would lead to less division, that it would have more, coming together sort of in the middle kind of impact. We did pass a bill in the Senate last biennium, I believe 2 years ago. It was a bipartisan bill at the time. It did not pass in the House. This year, I don't believe the House's election bill includes ranked choice voting. That came over to the Senate. Ranked choice voting this past year took a lot of hits around the country. There are people who are skeptical of it and sort of don't think it's a good proposal, so I think there's not as much support for it as there was a few years ago. It is used in Burlington, and they use it for their local elections, so there are parts of Vermont that do use it. I think that at this point we have so many things on our plate, it's not really a battle that many people want to pick at this point, so it's not, I don't believe that there are bills for it, but I don't believe it made it into the House's election bill. So we'll see moving forward whether it comes back or not.
Right up front here again, please.
Okay, I'd like to put her on Middlebury. I've taught ranked choice voting many times in classrooms. And every system of voting that you can name has its anomaly. Our current system has the anomaly, you can win with less than half. Ranked choice voting, if you don't have half, all of the people at the bottom are eliminated. The people they voted for are moved up to whatever their next choice was. And this keeps going till somebody has half. Now, somebody who had the most votes in the beginning might end up losing. That's the anomaly. You could have 40% of the vote at the beginning and the most and lose. So you pick another system. They all have their own unique anomalies. Question is, which anomaly do you prefer?
Thank you. Any more questions?
The session's for waivers again. Question for Peter. One of the criticisms that I've read about Scott's proposal is that there was little input from professional educators in the field. I've been reading about the Commission on the Future of Public Education. I have a question for you about the process used by your committee to come up with your proposal.
I think that the administration might argue that they had little input. The secretary went on a listen and learn tour throughout the state, and I think she would argue that that really played a lot into the proposal that was made. I think those who maybe attended the listen and learn tour and provided their input might say, I'm not quite sure that quite lines up. Second half of your question? Oh, by committee, did you mean the House Education Committee, or did you mean the Commission on the Future of Public Education, which does not have a proposal? House Committee, we went about our business the way we always do, and that is to both hear from the administration, significant testimony from the administration about their proposal, what made it up, what its impacts would be, what some of it meant. And then we took significant testimony from the field, meaning superintendents and principals and organizations that represent them as well. And they also sort of went and worked with their members and came up with sort of policy papers that helped guide us. So that is really what led us. I will say that the Vermont Superintendents Association came to us with a very detailed policy brief, footnoted with research, that still led to many of them losing their jobs. But it was a really thoughtful proposal, and it has been a very helpful guide in our work.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, go ahead.
Lori Cox from Ripton. On a different note, so I know in Ripton, and this is probably not unique to Ripton, 2/3 of the money that we spend on our roads comes from state and federal funding. I mean, a lot of the it's state funding, but it's federal pass-through funding. And when we were approaching our last town meeting, knowing that, and that wasn't even counting FEMA, and we had just heard that, you know, FEMA might disappear on us, and we've had some significant events. We've set up a reserve fund with just a little seed of town monies that we are going to be actively asking folks that have a little more in their wallet to put in that, sort of as like self-insurance, you might say. I mean, I basically said to people, if we lose all this federal money, we're gonna give everybody a snow shovel and a box of salt, and that's gonna be the winter road project. And I'm not really, I mean, I'm kidding, but I'm not, because there you'd be. And I know that the governor balks at any kind of tax increase. Has the state in any way considered? There are people in this state that have more money that actually will say, tax me more. Has the state thought about creating an opportunity? Obviously, anybody can always give the state money, but you have to kind of set it up and give people the opportunity and a mechanism for it. Has anybody thought about that on the state level?
Yes, I mean, I think that people are always trying to figure out different revenue options that are viable and feasible and palatable in the current climate. As you said, people can make donations to the state and do. For example, people donate land to put in public land, and there are mechanisms, there are certain funds in the state that do accept charitable dollars. They're set up to accept it. It's not the normal way that the state, that any state, not just our state, but any state, any government raises money is through taxation. And taxation is set up in a way to, you know, create policy outcomes about who you're trying to get money from and how. You know, the state is not a charitable organization, it is a public entity. So I think it becomes complicated when you're trying to figure out, do you want to turn the state into a charity? That's not real. So I have had conversations about this with people. I think it becomes complicated as to how it would be managed on a large scale. Like I said, there are certain funds, like you can make donations to the Fish and Wildlife Fund. You can, and those funds are set up for it. But on a larger scale, the way that the state receives revenue is through various forms of taxes and fees.
Great, thank you. Jim, I'll get to you in just 1 second. Gardner?
Gardner, Merriam, New Haven. I just listened to all your great ideas and great questions, and I think to myself, it's population, it's jobs, it's housing. You know, the healthcare costs, everything is about not having enough people, not having enough young people. Look at our aging here. So I just, you know, what are we doing about housing? What are we doing about getting people to stay here? Because it's really, to me, this is what I hear, is it's all about the population.
Thank you. I would say one of the reasons why you look at around here and most people are older is that people with little kids are getting them ready for school right now, and it's a bad time for them to come. People with jobs. And people with jobs are too. Yeah. But housing and getting young people here. One of the things I would say that we did, and you can read the Addison Independent, given a plug for John's paper, we passed a major child care bill 2 years ago that has helped almost every single working family in the state. I was the lead sponsor and chief architect of that bill, Act 76, and that has done a huge amount to support young families and hopefully make it easier for young families to move to the state. In terms of housing, over the last 5 years, we've put hundreds of millions of dollars into housing programs. VHIP, which is the Vermont Housing Improvement Fund, which improves rental housing. We have put money into mortgage and rental subsidies during the pandemic. We've put money into the homelessness program. We've put money into developing housing through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. We've put money into lots of different housing programs over the last 5 years. And my committee, the Finance Committee, passed a bill that's over in the House now that creates a new program called CHIP, which is, I can't remember what CHIP stands for, but it helps to fund infrastructure and housing developments, which often is the sort of linchpin for financing a housing development. The sidewalks, the roads, the water, the sewer. So the big development that's happening, Stonecrop in Middlebury, is a good example of a housing project that needs help paying for the infrastructure that goes into that project. So we have put a lot of money into housing. That being said, there's still a massive housing crisis in Vermont. We're trying to chip away, no pun intended, chip away at it every year, and there's so much more work that needs to be done. But you're absolutely right. It's really a demographic problem, and housing is part of that.
Thank you. Jim, what do you got to you? Jim McClay from New Haven. First, I'm a director on the Farm Bureau, and it's great to see everybody here. Such a good turnout down here, and we're glad to have you, and the legislatures that come and spend their time here answering the questions and everything. If you're interested in joining the Farm Bureau, it's great. They've got some great services going on, and good lobbyists in Montpelier, and I get some good information. But I ran out of time already. But my question was going to be about Senate Bill 1, which is exempting military retired pay from income. And Vermont's one of the 3 states that taxes military retirement, and it's not so much as, yes, that affects me, and that would be something I'd like to see, but looking at it from the point that that's what's draw for somebody who's 20 years old and retires from the military, would they want to move to Vermont? That's going to be one of the 3 states that taxes that. Probably not. And last week I heard that bill, which has been on the board for the last 3 or 4 years, is finally making some headway, but it's kind of being held hostage because the governor vetoed the financial readjustment that included the hotel payments. Is that accurate, or is there any comments on that? Or what do you see for the future of that bill this year?
Your last part is not accurate. I don't think the military retirement pay came into it was not part of the budget adjustment. It was not part of the negotiations. I have not heard that at all. So that was not. There were other issues with the budget adjustment and the hotel motel program, but that was not part of the negotiations, to my knowledge.
You're right.
Okay, and I believe there was a floor amendment in the House. I don't know if that passed.
Yeah. So there's a similar bill on the House side, H43, which similar to this one has remained stuck on the wall. The pro tem in the Senate and the chairs of the Senate committee control what gets pulled off the wall and what gets talked about. Similar in the House, the Speaker of the House and the chairs of the House committee control what's allowed to get pulled off and talked about. That bill, those 2 bills on each side have not been pulled off the wall and talked about. You'll have to ask the Speaker and the pro tem as to why they're not allowing that. There has been, as Ruth pointed out, Senator Hardy pointed out, there has been an amendment to attempt to take what was in H40, I think it's 43 or 42, anyhow, the same bill relative to retirement benefits for military, and put it into a different bill that also related to Social Security tax benefit, reducing the taxes on Social Security tax benefits, try to stick it in there. As soon as that got stuck in, that bill got pulled off the floor, stuck back in committee, and now it's stuck on the wall again. So there's a serious aversion by the House leadership. I'm not mentioning any names, but House leadership is purposefully keeping that on the wall and preventing that from getting voted on. And there's that one particular bill, and the House side has more than 75 co-sponsors. It has a lot of House support. Therefore, because we all hear from our constituents, we would like to see that one talked about. But the House leadership does not want to have that talked about. And I got to admit, that's personally very frustrating.
So I will add, if I can, to this question. So I'm not in the House, I'm not part of leadership, I don't get to make those decisions, but this bill has been around for a number of years. We do provide, the first $10,000 of pensions are not taxed, so we do have, military pensions are not taxed. I want to point out for people who are not familiar with this, this is military retirement for people who were career military. Which are about 10% of our veterans in the state. So this is not a tax benefit that would be for all veterans, it's just the 10% that were career military. And then they receive an average pension for if I'm remembering these numbers right, for officers is around $42,000 a year, and for enlisted is around $18,000 per year. So they are, fairly decent pensions compared to most Vermonters. We are a very small state, as has been pointed out, and we are also very shy of revenue right now. Anytime we provide a tax benefit for one group of Vermonters, another group of Vermonters has to make that up somehow, and often bear the brunt of it. So trying to find that sort of balance is what we try to do with our taxation system, is trying to find a balance. And unfortunately, we are an older state, a lot of retirees across the board, all kinds of retirees, a lot of people who rely on Social Security, and that's our tax base. So if we reduce taxes for one group, who's gonna make it up, and what are we gonna cut? And right now, given the situation with the federal budget and the amount of revenue that we're looking to get reduced, doing tax cuts for anybody is challenging right now. So usually we look at that in the large sort of budget at the end of the session. What can we afford on the taxation side? What can we afford on the spending side, and try to make that balance? So my guess is this issue will continue to be part of the conversation, but I just hope everyone understands that it's a balancing act. And for that small group of people, it's $5 million, which is not nothing. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we prioritize? And given the financial situation, it's really hard to do that.
Okay, thank you. I got 3 questions, and we're gonna have to get off quick so we can end this legislative session. So I'll go with you, and then you finish up with you, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Keller from Middlebury. There's something that's kind of bothered me for a very long time, and it's not only at the state level, but it happens at the national level too. And when you were talking about bills getting stuck on the wall and they're not brought in to be discussed or voted on, I find it absolutely absurd that whether it's a Democratic or a Republican organization that is in control, that's allowed to happen. If a bill is put together, my feeling is that it should be brought to the floor automatically, not stuck on a wall, and the discussion made and a vote taken. So I don't know what your feelings are, but I'd like to hear what your feelings are about that, because I think that's something that needs to change, not only statewide, but national too.
I'll take that to start with. First, I just want to provide some context. We have, I believe, over 800 bills at this point in the legislative session, and we're just in the first year. So, literally, there's not enough time to do every single bill. 800 bills. And there is a committee process, so once a bill gets introduced, it gets sent to a committee, and the committee takes extensive testimony on it. As Peter was mentioning, extensive testimony from the administration, from experts, from advocates, from everyday Vermonters, from anybody who might be impacted by a bill, and that literally will take months. So we really try to understand the implications of every bill before we vote on it, and we make changes to each bill in committee to sort of, based on what we've heard, based on the data, based on the research, based on the testimony, and that takes a lot of time. I welcome any of you to come up and spend a day with any of us to see how the process works, and you'll understand why we cannot do 800 bills. Now, I also will say some of those bills get incorporated into, you know, 2 bills get incorporated into a bigger bill. A lot of them are the same bill, just from a different angle, you know, might have different tweaks to it. There's Senate bills that are the same as House bills, as Rob was mentioning. So the 800 bills do get skinny down, but there's just not enough time. And so we have to prioritize. And when you're in the majority and you're in leadership, that's part of your job, is to prioritize and say, this is the thing that's most important. And right now, everybody's priority, I think, both parties, both houses, the priority is the education bill. So education and then housing and healthcare. Those are the 3 biggest priorities. I think I see Rob nodding. For everybody. And, you know, we have different takes on how do we do them, but we can't do every bill because it would distract us from those 3 big priorities. So that's my answer to that.
I'll just add to that. Senator Hardy's absolutely right. We can't address all 800 bills. We just can't. Part of the reason why we have 800 bills is because any member of either the House or the Senate is allowed to write as many bills as they want. And so there are a handful, I'll say a handful, who just literally flood the system with bills. I mean, you would be surprised how many bills some of these people can generate. And I'll admit, many of those are kind of frivolous. So kind of like seriously, you put a bill into that? That's going to waste a lot of people's time. It costs about, what is the number? About $1,000 per bill just to have it written. Just to have it written and go through legislative council and get it written and put on the board. So 800 bills, that's $800,000 have gotten spent just getting bills that are going to stick on a wall and not go anywhere. So maybe we got to think about, to address that problem, is maybe limit the number of bills any one member is allowed to write. I don't know, that's just a thought. I mean, that's one. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but there might be ways to reduce just the number that we get. But they're all, so given that we can't address them all, there really needs to be a way, as Senator Hardy pointed out, to prioritize those. And right now, the way that things are structured, the leadership does that. But there ought to be other mechanisms, and there are some. Like, for example, it is possible to put an amendment out on the floor or take a vote on the floor to grab a particular bill out of committee and bring it out to the floor. In fact, that's happened once in the Senate already relative to the clean heat standard. So it is possible to do that. There are mechanisms to accomplish that, and we may end up coming down to that, but there's a lot of negotiation that goes on prior to that, which is, in fact, that's the reason why the military retirement pension taxation content got pulled out of the bill that was stuck in the wall and put it in another one because we knew that other one was coming to the floor. Let's put it in there and then it'll all get voted on. But as I mentioned, leadership said, nope, as soon as that got put in there, we stuck it back on the wall in another committee. So even the other things, such as Social Security, won't get voted on because of that. So yeah, there's that constant tension, and there's a lot of negotiation and relationship building that goes on in both the House and the Senate to try to get the right things voted on at the right time. So I don't know that there's one really perfect answer to your question. There just isn't.
Yeah. We pretty much run out of time, but since it's our last meeting, a couple. Okay, no, you don't have a question. Okay, we'll leave it up to Mr. Shafi. You can do the last question of our legislative breakfast.
Thank you, Dave Sharp from Bristol. So I just wanted to point out that the language makes a difference, and we talk about taxing veterans' pensions. We have the most progressive income tax in the country. So if you're a veteran living on just your veteran pension and Social Security, you're paying little or no taxes. If you're a veteran or a teacher or any other profession that has a Social Security and a pension, and you start a a construction company and your income is $1 million a year, you're gonna pay a lot of taxes on your Social Security and your veterans benefits. So my question is to the legislators, please, if you're going to consider not exempting veterans benefits, pensions from taxes, please exempt teachers, because we know that they are paid less than the national average. It's hard to attract good teachers in our school system. So would you consider exempting teachers' pensions from taxes?
Thanks, Dave. I think that's a really important, the way that you started. We do have the most, if not the most progressive tax systems in the country, meaning that the less you make, the less you pay, the more you make, the more you pay. And so it's based on total income. And so you could have multiple types of income, as Dave said, and be quite wealthy, and the military retirement is just part of your wealth. So we do have to look at the full picture. I think if we were to exempt teacher retirement, again, the cost of that would be substantial. And so, you make a good point of once you exempt one retirement pension, what about the rest who are also public servants of a different kind? So again, that's where we get back to the balance. And there are multiple proposals. I had one that I mentioned at an earlier breakfast about a tax credit for unpaid caregivers, who are people taking care of a sick spouse or a child or a parent, and they don't get paid for it, and shouldn't they get some kind of tax benefit for the work that they do? So there are a lot of worthy people who've done worthy things, whether they've served our country in the military or served our state as a teacher or serving their family as an unpaid caregiver. We can't provide tax relief for all of them, but what we can do is broadly as a system have a fair and progressive tax system, which we do in Vermont. And it's not perfect, and depending on who you are, you might think it hits you differently, but that's the overall goal when looking at our tax system. And I'm going to just use my last 10 seconds to tell everybody that on April 19th, and I want to make sure that you know, Rob, and John and Peter, and everyone here, that I'm doing a forum with the Attorney General and the State Treasurer at the Town Hall Theater on April 19th at 10 in the morning. It's a Saturday, about the federal situation and the impact on Vermont. There will be a registration link just so we know how many people are coming and I will send that out to everybody and post it on Front Porch Forum, etc. But I really hope that you'll come. A lot of people have asked me to do this, and so I'm trying to follow up on the requests I got from people, especially at the Shoreham Town Meeting, Barb. So thank you, and I hope that you can come to it in a couple weeks.
All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody. We're winding up down this year.